And David might have said something like, oh, I don't know, 38, 30, maybe 40. This house was so packed full of people on the night of November 18th that the only people that had their own beds were Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, and Edward Everett, the Grand Speaker for the next day. And somewhere between 11 o'clock and midnight, a train pulled into the train station half a block that way. It was the governor's train that had been long delayed, and off of it hopped Andrew Curtin, governor of Pennsylvania, who came up to his friend's house expecting to find a place to sleep. And when he got up here, David realized the only two spots he had left were with Abraham Lincoln and Edward Everett. And he thought to himself, I cannot ask the President of the United States. I just can't do that. So they went up to Edward Everett's room. He knocked on the door and he said, Dr. Everett, sir, do you mind sharing your bed with Governor Curtin, sir? Well, Edward Everett got a little indignant. He said, you know I have a bladder condition. And Governor Curtin said, and I think I can find someplace else to sleep. And he turned around. Now, Edward Everett put in his diary, I didn't get to bed till 11 o'clock, didn't get to sleep till 1 a.m., worried about the executive of Pennsylvania suddenly tumbling in on top of me at any moment. But if it was bad for him, it might have been worse for his daughter, Charlotte. You see, his daughter, Charlotte, she knew her father was about my age. She knew he was going to be retiring, and she had to be here. This was his most important speech, so she came with it. And I don't know how big Charlotte was, but she had to sleep in bed with two other women, and in the middle of the night, the bed collapsed. And as Edward Everett put that in his diary, she betook herself of the floor. Well, if they couldn't sleep, they could come out here in the square, because all the other people who couldn't find a place to sleep came down here and they started to serenade Abraham Lincoln. And so they started to sing, we are coming, coming, our Union to restore. We're coming, Father Abraham, 300,000 more. And they sang that all night long. Next morning, they had a bigger crowd than they expected, so there was a little bit of a delay, but they finally got going. They went up Baltimore Street with a parade, and Edward Everett got up, and he spoke for 2 full hours out of the cemetery. Anyone can quote something Edward Everett said? I read it, I can't quote it. And then Abraham Lincoln got up and he spoke for barely 2 minutes. What good American doesn't know 77 years ago? But I will give Edward Everett a lot of credit, because the very next day he sat down and he wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln, and in that letter he said, I flatter myself if I came as close to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes. From the greatest speechmaker in America, that was a mighty big compliment to Abraham Lincoln. And you know, I disagree with Mr. Lincoln, and I agree with him. I disagree with him when he said the world will little note or long remember what we say here. What good American doesn't know 77 years ago? But I will agree with him when he said they could never forget what they did here. And I hope you see that that was certainly my comrades in the Army. But there was no question that was the people who lived in this town as well. Rose to the emergency and did some amazing deeds. Well, my friends, Mr. Daniel Kelly has done very well these years. And he is a partner of Purchase Stock Brothers store. And he is a fine merchant of McClay's Mill Flour. And I must go see Mr. Skelly about a flour deal. And I bid you adieu. Folks, thank you. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed the tour. Anyone have any last questions before we part company?
How long did Lincoln stay here afterwards?
He left the very same day that he gave the speech. And it was kind of tough for him because he was getting ill at the time. He actually had a mild case of smallpox. And he laid down on the train because he had a terrible headache. He was fortunate that it was a mild case and he survived. And but his valet, who was a freed African American, William Johnson, unfortunately got it and died from it. Lincoln's son had been ill. He kept sending telegrams, getting telegrams back and forth to Washington about the condition of his son, who also had the same thing. He had a mild case, fortunately, of smallpox as well. But yes, he left right after they did the thing down at the Presbyterian Church. He did that. Now I do have some cards.